Hello and welcome to PFF Now. I'm Doug Kyed, joined as always by Ari Meirov and Brad Spielberger. Ari, how are you doing today?
Doing really well. We have another Monday night game coming up, Thanksgiving coming up, a lot of football here on the way. So a lot going on in the NFL, and we're here to talk about it.
Absolutely. And Brad, how are you doing?
Yeah, what's better than a nice plate with turkey and mashed potatoes and stuffing than some Andy Dalton versus Tim Boyle to really just make the day a magical day.
That's about as appetizing as boiled turkey, I would say. That's what we're getting prepared for Thanksgiving, but still exciting stuff on the way. And some of the biggest news kind of bookended the weekend a little bit was the Denver Broncos extended two young wide receivers. And this could be move that move or a couple of moves that could really kind of expand into the offseason as well. They locked up Tim Patrick on Friday and kind of a news-packed Friday, and then Cortland Sutton on Monday. So, Brad, take us through those contract extensions a little bit and where they stack up among some of the other recent contracts that other wide receivers have been extended with.
Yeah, I think two really good deals for Denver here to get both guys done. They obviously have Tim Patrick and Cortland Sutton now through 2024 and 2025, and have Jerry Jeudy, their 2020 first round pick, and Noah Fant, their 2019 first round tight end. So their entire core is locked up for really strong deals. So Cortland Sutton at just under, it's about 15 and change million per year. He comes in below Cooper Kupp, which maybe his incredible season is serving as a ceiling, and teams are kind of using that contract to say, well, look how incredible he's been. Why should you top that number? And Tim Patrick further down the list. So Sutton comes in at the 16th highest receiver on a per year basis. I think a phenomenal deal for Denver because, keeps him out of free agency, but still a modest deal, still a deal that you can work around both of these now. Even though Denver does become just the third team in the NFL with two receivers making 10 plus million on multi-year deals, both are very flexible, palatable. They can work around them. I think it's great work by GM George Payton.
Yeah, Ari, what was your reaction to these two moves?
Well, yeah, it's for sure two big time extensions for two young receivers who still have so much potential. And really, for me, it's interesting because what the Broncos have set up now is fascinating. And let me just explain why. And you kind of mentioned it a little bit, Doug, but they have a young nucleus on offense with Sutton, Jeudy, Patrick, Hamler, Fant, and then a young promising running back in Javonte Williams. They just traded Von Miller and got an additional second and third round pick in the offseason. So they have draft picks. They're projected to have near the top of the league in cap space this offseason. They have a young nucleus on offense. The fan base there is awesome. If you're a quarterback this offseason, whether it's Deshaun Watson, Aaron Rodgers, Russell Wilson, whoever it is, and you want a new place, but also want an immediate chance to win, Denver has become a very intriguing spot. Now, what will end up happening to Vic Fangio is going to be something to watch. The new GM, George Payton, got a 6-year deal, and he inherited Fangio as the head coach. So that's going to be interesting because sometimes whenever a GM gets hired, he wants to pick his own guy. But overall, the Broncos have set themselves up nicely to be serious players in the quarterback market this offseason, and that's going to be a very big topic.
Yeah, and there are some quarterbacks who could be hitting that veteran market. Aaron Rodgers among them. I think that we expect the drama that ensued right before the season or even in the offseason around the draft to continue into the 2022 offseason. And then Russell Wilson as well, especially with the way that the Seahawks are playing right now. It seems like something's brewing there. And Jay Glazer mentioned it even earlier this season that those trade talks probably will pick back up again. And if you're looking at potential teams for those two players to go to, I would put the Broncos right near the top of the list based on all the weapons that they do have on offense, like you mentioned, Javonte Williams, Noah Fant, the really four wide receivers when you include KJ Hamler in there as well. They've got another young tight end in Albert Ukwe-Bunam. So, yeah, they've got a ton of weapons on that offense. And as you said as well, they've got the draft picks there as well. Ari, I'll lead this off with you. Which of those two quarterbacks do you think might be the better fit in Denver? And I don't know, is a head coaching change? Does that automatically come with the quarterback change as well?
Well, that's going to be interesting. Maybe, the head coaching situation is interesting because maybe you want to keep the head coach, but you want a new offensive staff. I mean, you never know really exactly what a new quarterback would want over there. So that's a different topic. But, the Aaron Rodgers stuff this offseason, when it all unfolded on draft night, the one team that everyone talked about was Denver. And we know that George Payton made the call. We know the Packers said right away that they were not interested in doing it. And we know, I wouldn't say that we know, but Aaron Rodgers, one of the teams that he would have been interested in is Denver. And his girlfriend is actually from Denver and actually has a house over there, I believe. So I think there's a lot of interesting little nuggets there about the Broncos. And they have all the weapons, like we just said. And if Aaron wants a new place where he's going to have the weapons that he wants, and he's going to have maybe a team that's going to be more aggressive, possibly, and he could have some say in what he wants to do, maybe the Broncos could be a team that he looks at. And it kind of, what they're doing right now reminds me a little bit of what Tampa Bay did when they got Tom Brady, where they had a really good offense set up and they have draft picks and they have cap space and they could get a star quarterback. And once that quarterback comes in, let's try to help him even more. It feels like George Payton has set up that team to do just that. The hard part will be getting the quarterback, but if they're able to get one this offseason, it's a team that really has set themselves up very nicely.
I think it's a great comparison, too. I mean, you look at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers bring in Bruce Arians. Even when Peyton was in Denver, Peyton Manning, they go ahead, fire John Fox, move on to Gary Kubiak, and bring in that offensive mind that he can work with. So that is potentially a possibility where they look at a new coach and say, you get to pick your coach and come here with this roster. I would say Russell Wilson now, in my mind, is maybe even the better option. I mean, Courtland Sutton and Tim Patrick are these downfield jump ball receivers. Russell Wilson likes to dance around and make things happen late in the play. I think both of those guys work with that skill set very well. He'll have the best offensive line he's had in a long time there with, Garrett Bowles, a stud left tackle. They can, they've added pieces in the draft recently around that. I think it is a very, very enticing option. As you mentioned, Ari, too, good fan base, good city. People like to be in Denver. It's sunny 300 days a year. There's a lot of components here. I think they will have a good veteran quarterback and maybe a stud veteran coach that kind of comes out of the woodwork looking to chase the Super Bowl.
Certainly, or they could go the younger option, bringing in a guy like Kellen Moore, who's got an offense built somewhat similarly to what they're doing there in Denver with really three top wide receivers, good running game. Aria, is there another head coach option that you're thinking of as well?
I think there's one intriguing option, and that is Green Bay's offensive coordinator, Nathaniel Hackett, who has a really good relationship with Aaron Rodgers, a name that some people have mentioned could be in the head coaching carousel this year. What if Denver goes in that route, says, hey, we'll bring your OC over here, just come to us as well? That's another really interesting option here. I mean, like, when you start connecting some of the dots over here, it makes a lot of sense. Again, Green Bay has a lot of season left this year. Who knows? Maybe they win the Super Bowl. Maybe Aaron wants to stay. But when you look at what Denver has done, and we'll look what they could possibly do this offseason, there are some options there that make a lot of sense. And once we get there, it's going to be very interesting.
Let's talk a little bit about some of the injuries that are percolating around the NFL. And let's start off with some of the main injuries that occurred this weekend. And one that I'm really looking at is CeeDee Lamb with the Dallas Cowboys. He did suffer a concussion on Sunday. Stephen Jones of the Cowboys said there was some optimism for him to play on Thursday against the Raiders. But it really seemed like that Cowboys offense struggled on Sunday against a team, the Chiefs defense, that I really was not expecting them to struggle against. I was expecting a really big, high-powered matchup between those two teams, and the Chiefs did a really good job of limiting the Cowboys. I think the fact that they were without Amari Cooper on COVID protocol, he won't play on Thursday, and the fact that CeeDee Lamb left that game early as well, that really impacted them. Ezekiel Elliott was banged up in that game as well. So, since it's one of those big 3 games on Thanksgiving, CeeDee Lamb is really the one that I'm going to be watching the most because the Raiders haven't been playing quite as well recently, but they're still definitely a team that, if they are playing up to their full potential, could definitely make a game out of that against the Cowboys and potentially beat them. Ari, what's an injury from this week, or really one that's kind of around the NFL right now that you're watching for this upcoming slate?
Well, I think when we're talking about Thanksgiving, the Saints are a team that will be playing on Thanksgiving, and a player who has not played now in 2 straight weeks is Alvin Kamara of that knee injury, and we really haven't heard much about what's going on there. Like, he practiced last week on Wednesday was limited. Then on Thursday, he didn't practice at all. Friday again, didn't practice, was ruled out. No one really gave an exact update on what happened there. He has had knee injuries in the past, and maybe there's a possibility they just wanted to hold him out on Sunday so he could play on Thursday. But up until now, to miss 2 straight games for a star player, for not to get talked about as much as I would expect it to, is something very interesting. And I'm really curious to see what's going to happen here on Thursday night if he ends up playing in that night game against Buffalo. That's one to watch for sure as we get closer to that game.
I think one thing there with the Saints as well is that they're a team that historically does not talk about injuries as much as many other teams do. So if this is a situation with a team that was a little bit more open with injuries, we'd probably get a lot more clarity on what's going on there. But since they are so secretive about that, that's why we don't have a better understanding of what the injury is or what the timeline is. Brad, what's an injury that you're watching right now?
Yeah, I would say real quick too. I think it shows the Mark Ingram trade was a very smart move by them, and maybe they had an idea that he was dealing with some nicks and bruises here and there, and so then it kind of got exacerbated. But to stick with our Thursday trend, I think the absence of Justin Fields is a very big possibility on Thursday. Turns out no broken ribs. We just have bruised ribs, and there was a report from Jay Glazer. They did also look into his spleen just to make sure there was no internal organs impacted. But I think if you're the Chicago Bears at this point, you just lost to a backup quarterback at home coming off a bye anyway. Your season is completely over. There's a lot of changes coming. I'm not sure why you would force Justin Fields into the lineup unless he is 100% anyway. So we might have Andy Dalton versus Tim Boyle, which I mentioned at the top of the show. But hey, we'll all be watching anyway. So
Absolutely. If it's not Tim Boyle, then it's Jared Goff would be getting healthy, or David Blau would be in that game. I think regardless, not the best quarterback situation for the Lions. I just want to tell you guys that if you do have any questions, drop them in the comment section right now. We'll get to those at the end of this live stream. But let's also talk about some long-term injuries that we're monitoring as well. I'm not sure how much this really impacted things on Sunday, but the Tennessee Titans did not look like themselves, losing to the Houston Texans. Really ugly loss that a lot of people were not expecting. The Titans were playing extremely well leading into this week. They were the number 1 seeds in the AFC. They had a very easy strength of schedule, and we've already seen that, in the long run, maybe that doesn't really mean anything if you're going to lose to the Houston Texans. But Derrick Henry, it does still seem like there's a glimmer of hope that if they make it into the playoffs, if they make it long enough, that he could actually come back from that foot injury. It's not necessarily a season-ending injury. I remember that when I was covering the Patriots back, I think it was in 2015. It was either 2015. Yeah, it was 2015. Julian Edelman had a Jones fracture in his foot. And that was, once again, right around midseason. He was able to come back for the playoffs. I will throw one thing in, though, is that he did not really look like the same player until the next season. He didn't totally look like himself in the playoffs. And that's as a wide receiver. Obviously, he has to do a little bit more quick cuts, a little bit more as a route runner, and he's a player that really, thrives on his agility and quickness. Derrick Henry's a little bit different, but Derrick Henry's also a bigger player, so that could impact things as well. But I will say that, based on the timeline for a Jones fracture, it seems like there's at least, like I said, a possibility that it wouldn't be Adrian Peterson and Deontay Foreman carrying them through the playoffs, that it actually could be Derrick Henry, and that would be pretty big for them. Ari, what's more of a longer-term injury that you're monitoring throughout the season?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'll just, Tampa Bay won the Super Bowl last year. It's all about getting healthy at the right time. They're banged up like a lot right now. So many guys are out and they're getting healthier. And you look at this team tonight, they're expected to get back Sean Murphy-Bunting. They're expected to get back Rob Gronkowski. They have guys like Antonio Brown, Scotty Miller, Carlton Davis, Richard Sherman, Vita Vea, a very important piece there for that team. All of them are banged up, but they'll eventually come back. And for this team, for Tom Brady, all that matters is that everyone is there once we get to playoff time. And really, that's all that matters to them. And it's looking like it's trending in the right direction for that to happen for them. And with that division, which right now is still open a little bit, but for the most part, we all expect Tampa Bay to eventually win it. They're in a position right now where they'll eventually get all these guys back. And come playoff time, they'll have everybody ready to go to try to repeat as champions.
Yeah, Brad, what's a longer-term injury that you're monitoring right now?
Yeah, it's the guy that has not actually stepped on the field all season. He tore his Achilles before the season began, and that's Rams running back Cam Akers. And I put this out last week, but I was actually able to ask a Rams player before the season, just hey, what's one guy who's looking great in camp so far? And he answered Cam Akers in a millisecond. So it was actually about a week before the injury unfortunately happened. So he may have jinxed him there, but. Look at this way. Darrell Henderson, who they obviously did not trust that much to be their number one guy, even when he was the number one guy, they make a pretty expensive trade for Sonny Michel. He's an RB1 in fantasy. He's 12th in fantasy points right now in the season, and he was not even their top guy. You add in Cam Akers, who also I think has a better pass catching element, which matters with the loss of Robert Woods and this patchwork wide receiver group they have. He could be a massive late season addition in both the run and pass game, and I think is a more dynamic player than Henderson, and it could go a long way in this, loaded NFC.
The Cam Akers situation is also interesting because he was planning on changing his number to number 3 before the season began. And Odell Beckham Jr. actually took that when he went to the Rams. So who knows what number Cam Akers will be wearing if he is able to come back. Probably the number 23 that he wore in his rookie season, but just adds another element there as well. One other player just worth mentioning is J.J. Watt. I think it was originally reported that it was going to be a season-ending injury for him, but he had some kind of cryptic tweets about the possibility that he could return this season as well if the Cardinals get deep enough into this playoff run. So that would obviously make a serious impact as well. But this season's just so strange in general that Ari, did you have something to say about the Watt situation?
Yeah, I mean, the funny thing is he's done it before. If you remember 2 years ago, he had a torn pec early in the season, out for the year. Texans make the playoffs, and he was back for that game. It was a surprise. So he's done it before. It was a bit of a cryptic tweet yesterday. But hey, if there's one guy who could do it, it's J.J. Watt, and he's shown us that he could do it. So it's definitely a name to watch. So good call there for Doug.
Yeah, well, like I was gonna say, the season is so bizarre in general that we're throwing around teams like the Packers. We were talking about Aaron Rodgers, like the Cardinals with J.J. Watt, like the Rams. All these teams we think of as being these top tier elite teams, but this season more than really any other, it's any given Sunday, and these teams are losing really to teams that we wouldn't expect them to. So. I'll throw this to Brad, I guess, first, just as kind of a final topic. What do you think is causing that this season? That even more than usual, there does seem to be even more parity in the NFL.
It's weird because the first part of the season, the first 6 weeks or so, I did some work how point differential, like there was a huge separation. There were very good teams and very bad teams. There actually was like no parity at the beginning of the year, almost to an extreme extent as you look compared to the past couple of years. Now, I do think injuries are a huge factor. Obviously, the Tennessee Titans are on pace to break a record for the most guys on their active roster in a season, and we're only in week 11 at this point. Tampa Bay Buccaneers, LA Rams, all these teams, so on and so forth. But it's not just the injuries. It really is a fascinating question. I think at a certain point, the margins are shrinking, and I think there are fewer teams and organizations that are making so many mistakes and not understanding edge cases and how to, find little edges here and there. And it's showing up in the results to where, like you said, any given Sunday, the Texans beat the Titans this week. There's just, you never know what's going to happen.
And Ari, do you think that there are eventually going to be teams that do kind of break out of this mold and start getting a little bit more consistent as the season goes along?
I mean, again, it's really been in any given Sunday league, so who knows? But what I will say is that there's one team that I think has been consistent throughout this year and doesn't get talked about at all, and it's Arizona being at 9-2 right now. And I think it's worth just giving them some props very well. We talk about all these teams losing all of a sudden to these bad teams. A team like Arizona, despite the J.J. Watt injury, despite the DeAndre Hopkins injury, despite the Kyler Murray injury, for them to keep on winning, I think it's worth just giving them a bit of a shout out here and just mentioning how well they've done. And really Steve Keim and all the moves that he made this offseason and all the veterans that he brought in, which many people thought were like these washed players with A.J. Green and James Conner and Rodney Hudson, and even like Matt Prater and all these other guys who are just veteran leaders, and Colt McCoy, of course, who has been tremendous there as a leader and while he's playing there. I think it's just worth mentioning them. While all these other teams are losing and all of a sudden losing to these bad teams, Arizona is held in there and they're winning games and they're on top of a division that everyone had them finishing in last place. And I think it's just worth mentioning how well they've played this year, despite everyone else having all these random losses.
As a
One more
quick shout
topic.
out to Colt McCoy specifically too, who's now beaten the
sure.
Seahawks 2 years in a row in Seattle. Last year with the Giants, this year with Arizona. I think I saw a stat. He's actually the only quarterback in the NFL that has won a game in Seattle the last 2 seasons, because I guess Russ hasn't won a home game yet this year. So shout out Colt McCoy.
Just to kind of put a bow on this entire conversation that we've been having, with the Broncos wide receivers getting extended, the fact that maybe that could draw a player like Aaron Rodgers to Green Bay, it's worth at least asking how those 2 contracts could impact a potential Davante Adams extension, either in the season or what happens for him after the year. So, Brad, to you specifically on the wide receiver market, how do you think that this does impact, that type of extension? Is Davante Adams so much better than every wide receiver that we saw in free agency last offseason, and so much better than the guys who are getting extended, in the season, that it doesn't really impact him? Or could we see him getting, a deal somewhat similar to what we've already been looking at?
I do think that when there are players like a Davante Adams that are that good, they kind of don't view the rest of the market as impacting them. And they'll tell, I don't care what other guys sign for. But at a certain point, you can't really get away with that. And I mean, the last offseason now bleeding into this Courtland Sutton deal at $15 million per year, there has been a market correction. The wide receiver market was exploding for several years. Obviously, the pinnacle being DeAndre Hopkins getting that 2-year, $54.5 million deal. Those days are gone. And I think the Kenny Golladay signing last offseason, $18 million per year over 4, might still prove as the ceiling for the Chris Godwins, Mike Williams, Allen Robinsons of the world. So end of the day, I do think Davante Adams will top the Julio Jones APY at $22 million. I think he might get right around what David Bakhtiari got from Green Bay, $23 million per year over 4 years, but he's not going to touch DeAndre Hopkins by any stretch. And frankly, I think at this point, if I'm Green Bay, I say, look, you're even lucky to get this, because you are better than these guys. There's no question about that. But the league is showing us you can draft guys that are impact players right away. There are a lot of options in free agency. And frankly, a lot of these big signings just haven't gone well. So it will impact it. And I think he might be kind of able to avoid it. But the rest of the market is not in a good spot at all.
Yeah, I know that, before the season, he wanted a deal that would exceed DeAndre Hopkins' deal. I think that, the figure that they were looking for was really something in the $30 million category, which for a player like Davante Adams, sure, that's certainly possible. But, now that, Courtland Sutton signing for $15 million per year, are you really going to give Davante Adams twice that amount of money? Like I said, it's certainly possible. Courtland Sutton coming off the torn ACL, Davante Adams is the best wide receiver in the NFL right now. And if you're the Green Bay Packers, and if you're, even talking about an extension right now, if you want to convince Aaron Rodgers to come back, probably the only way to do that is to make sure that Davante Adams is right there with him, because that Aaron Rodgers isn't going to want to go into next season with Allen Lazard and Marquez Valdez-Scantling and Randall Cobb as his top wide receiver options. He's going to want Davante Adams there. So definitely an interesting situation. Ari, how do you see the Adams extension playing out here?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting situation after, in the offseason, it got so ugly to the point where they just stopped talking and we're like, hey, we're going to talk about this again in the offseason. But we've seen from Green Bay in the past that they're willing to do big contracts in season. They did it last year with David Bakhtiari. He tore his ACL the next week, which is unfortunate. But point being that they are willing to do massive contracts in season, and it wouldn't be a surprise at all if they're able to get a deal done. A, just to have one of the best receivers in football locked in for the future, but B, to again show Aaron Rodgers that we are committed to keeping our guys here. We want to have a roster that you would like, and for his future, for Aaron's future, for everyone, that if he's going to be back here next year, they obviously want to show him that they're all in and trying to keep everyone here. So it wouldn't be a surprise at all if they get it done. The Andrew Hopkins number, I know it's at 27. A lot of agents have had some talks about if it's actually a real 27. It's a little bit, it's a big topic of discussion in the agent community, but that's for a different day. But we'll see what he ends up getting. If he ends up getting the 27, I'll be really, really surprised. I think what Brad said, the 23, 24 probably makes more sense for Adams, and we'll see if it gets done here anytime soon.
Yeah, and there are multiple ways for him to become the highest paid wide receiver in the NFL. It's not only average salary, but also total guarantees, total contracts. So a lot of different ways around that. Well, thank you for watching PFF Now. I've been Doug Kyed, joined by Ari Meirov and Brad Spielberger. Make sure to go to pff.com, use promo code CYBER40 for 40% off any PFF subscription. Keep it on pff.com for all of your news and analysis. Follow Ari on Twitter at MySportsUpdate. Follow Brad on Twitter at PFF_Brad. Throw me a follow at Doug Kyed, and we will see you guys again next week.